Welcome back to the channel. Today's story explores what happens when an unstoppable empire crosses a line it was warned never to touch. What begins as a routine military investigation turns into a terrifying revelation about humanity, a species believed to be extinct, but secretly watching, waiting, and preparing for centuries. Stay with us until the end, because this story isn't about conquest or victory. It's about restraint, power, and why some doors should never be opened. This story teaches us that the greatest power is not the ability to destroy, but the discipline to choose not to. Humanity did not vanish because it was weak. It vanished because it recognized its own potential for devastation and chose self-control over domination. The Galactic Empire fell into the classic trap of arrogance, believing that size, numbers, and history guaranteed superiority. But true strength came from patience, unity, and preparation, guided by restraint. The humans won not by annihilating their enemy, but by proving they could, and deliberately choosing mercy instead. At its core, the story reminds us that civilizations collapse not from lack of power, but from lack of humility. And sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy is the one wise enough to lock itself away for everyone else's sake. Imagine being told your entire history is a lie. For 1,000 years, the Galactic Empire had erased entire civilizations from its records, dismissing them as weak or insignificant. But they were about to stumble upon a secret that had been sleeping for centuries, a secret that would challenge everything they thought they knew. If you want to see an arrogant empire get a serious reality check, stick with me. Admiral Zar stared out from the bridge of his flagship into what he thought was empty space. He was wrong. His sensors were screaming about dozens of strange metal objects, all broadcasting the same warning in 17 different languages. "Sir, we're getting a message from those things," said Lieutenant Vex, his blue-skinned communications officer. "Coming through the translator now," Zar grunted. As a warrior from the planet Kathra, he lived for conquest, and this little mystery smelled like a new territory for the Empire. For over a millennium, his people had proudly served the Empire, and he intended to carry on that tradition. Suddenly, a message flashed across every screen on the bridge. "Forbidden Terran Quarantine Zone. Entry prohibited by Galactic Treaty 2387X. Violation will result in immediate response." Zar scowled. In his 40 years of service, he'd never heard of this treaty. The Empire documented everything, every single agreement, every conquered planet. But a treaty that cordoned off a huge chunk of space? Impossible. By his estimate, this forbidden zone covered nearly 50 star systems. "Computer," he commanded, his voice sharp. "Search the Imperial Archives for Galactic Treaty 2387X. "Searching. No records found," the ship's monotone voice replied. "Fine. Search for Terran Quarantine Zone." "Searching. No records found." Zar's mind reeled. The Empire had dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years. How could a treaty of this magnitude just not exist in their records? "Dr. Yelan, get to the bridge now!" he barked into the comms. Dr. Yelan was the fleet's top xenobiologist, an expert on alien life. If anyone could figure this out, it was her. She glided onto the bridge moments later, her tentacles twitching with nervous energy as she read the warning. "Admiral, this is highly unusual," she said, her voice like soft music. Her species, the Zalani, were famous for their brilliant minds. "The word Terran isn't in any of our active language databases." "So what is it?" Zar demanded. "I cross-referenced it with our archives of dead languages," Dr. Yelan explained, her tentacles waving as she processed the information. "It seems to be an old word from the humans. Terra. In their primitive tongue, it means earth." Zar's eyes went wide. "Humans!" he scoffed. But they wiped themselves out centuries ago. According to our official records, yes, Dr. Yalen confirmed. They were a scrappy, aggressive species that barely figured out light-speed travel before blowing themselves up in a civil war. Their home world was turned to dust. Nothing should be left. The Admiral stepped toward the main view screen, squinting at the ancient beacons. They looked impossibly old, covered in strange symbols that seemed etched by time itself, yet they were still working perfectly. "How old are these things?" he asked. Dr. Yalen checked her scanner. Based on the metal decay, they've been out here for at least 2,000 years. Maybe more. She paused. "But Admiral, that makes no sense." "Why not?" "Because our records state humans only achieved spaceflight around 800 years ago. They couldn't have built these before they even knew how to leave their own planet." A cold feeling washed over Zar. Something was seriously wrong. Either the Empire's perfect records were a lie, or someone had gone to great lengths to hide the truth about this corner of the galaxy. "Lieutenant Vex, get a message to Imperial Command," he ordered. "Tell them we found an undocumented quarantine zone. We need answers now." "Yes, sir," Vex responded, her fingers flying across her console. As they waited, Zar pulled up the tactical display. The beacons formed a flawless defensive perimeter around the 50 star systems, but his long-range sensors picked up something even stranger beyond them. "Sir," Ensign Torres called out from the sensor station, "I'm detecting man-made structures inside several of those systems." "What kind of structures?" Zar asked, striding over. "Huge orbital stations, sir, and what look like massive shipyards. But there are no energy signatures. They're completely dark. It's like they're all asleep." Zar leaned over the console, reading the data himself. The structures were gigantic, some bigger than the Empire's largest space stations. They were orbiting dead planets in perfect formation, like colossal giants waiting for a wake-up call. "Any life signs?" he asked. "None, sir. No power, no communications, nothing. But they were definitely built by someone." A soft chime signaled the reply from Imperial Command. Lieutenant Vex looked up, a puzzled expression on her face. "Sir, Command says there's no record of any quarantine zone here. They're ordering us to push through, investigate, and report back on what we find." Zar gave a slow, deliberate nod. The Empire hated loose ends. His mission was clear: find out who built this and claim their technology. But a nagging feeling told him this was a mistake. The beacons weren't just warnings. They were a promise. Violation will result in immediate response. A response from who? "Dr. Yalen, what else can you tell me about humans?" he asked. The xenobiologist pulled up her files. "They were a young species, Admiral, but they were known for one thing above all else: adaptability. They could thrive almost anywhere and master new technology at an incredible speed. Were they a threat?" "Any species can be a threat, Admiral," Dr. Yelan replied cautiously. "But the old reports describe humans as intense, fiercely loyal to their own, but terrifyingly violent when provoked. Their civil war was said to be one of the most brutal conflicts the galaxy had ever seen." Zar looked back at the silent beacons. If humans had built these, were they trying to keep something out? Or were they trying to keep something in? "Admiral!" Lieutenant Vex suddenly shouted. "It's not Command this time. It's one of the beacons. It's sending a new message." "On screen," Zar commanded. The new message was short and chilling. "Imperial vessel, you have remained at this border for 4.7 hours. Declare your intentions or leave immediately." A dead silence fell over the bridge. The beacons weren't just dumb machines playing a recording. Someone, or something, was watching them in real time. "Sir," Ensign Torres whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "The beacon that sent that message just powered up a scanning array. It's analyzing our ship's capabilities." Zar's warrior instincts flared. He was being sized up. In his world, That was the first step before a fight. "All ships, yellow alert!" he roared. "Raise shields! Power up weapons! But do not fire unless I give the word!" The bridge instantly transformed, bathed in the soft glow of warning lights as the crew prepared for a battle they didn't understand. "Admiral," Dr. Yelan urged quietly, "perhaps we should fall back. First contact protocols state, 'The Empire does not retreat from the unknown, Doctor.'" Zar cut her off. "We conquer it." But even as he said the words, a seed of doubt was planted in his mind. Ancient beacons with advanced scanning technology. What else were they hiding? "Sir!" Torres yelled, his voice filled with alarm. "I'm detecting a massive power surge in the systems behind the barrier. Those dormant structures. They're coming online." The main view screen flickered, displaying sensor readings from 3 different star systems. All at once, lights began to race across the surfaces of the colossal orbital platforms. Energy levels were spiking off the charts. The sleeping giants were waking up. "So they know we're here," Zar said, his voice grim. "Admiral," Vex reported, "Imperial Command is repeating their last order. They want a full report on the technology we find." Zar glanced at his crew. Loyal, brave, and utterly confident in the Empire's might. His fleet of 12 heavy cruisers and 40 support ships could crush almost any opponent. But this felt different. This felt like poking a beast that had been left alone for a reason. "Sir," Dr. Yelan said one last time, "the beacons warned of a treaty. If we cross that line, then we deal with the consequences," Zar declared, his pride overriding his caution. "The Empire answers to no one." He turned to his navigator, his voice ringing with finality. "Take us in." Imagine being told over and over that a place is forbidden. Every sign, in every language imaginable, flashes the same warning: turn back, do not enter. But you're Admiral Zar of the unstoppable Galactic Empire, and warnings are for lesser beings. He gave the order, plot a course through the beacon perimeter. We're going in. Pride, it turns out, can be a very dangerous thing. He was convinced that whatever was hiding behind those warnings would soon be kneeling before him. As the first ship crossed the line, all the warning beacons just went silent. And in the blackness ahead, new, massive structures began to wake up. What do you think happens when a bully kicks down a door they were warned never to open? Let me know in the comments, and let's see if you're right. The first thing that hit Admiral Zar was the chilling silence. As his fleet slipped into the Forbidden Zone, every frantic warning signal just vanished. The ancient beacons that had screamed their warnings for ages went dark and quiet. But this wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, electric quiet before a lightning strike. "Status report," Zar ordered, trying to sound bored, but a knot was tightening in his stomach. A young lieutenant named Vex replied, "All ships are through, sir. No hostile action. The beacons seem to have just shut down." Just then, a voice crackled from the sensor station. "Sir, it's Ensign Torres. I'm picking up something. Really strange. The space around us feels different." "Explain," Zar snapped. Torres stared at his screen, completely baffled. "The electromagnetic readings are all wrong, sir," Torres said. "It's like this whole chunk of space is covered by a giant, invisible scanning net. I can't find where it's coming from, but I can tell you for sure. Something is watching us." Dr. Yelan, the ship's top scientist, hurried over to a scanner, and her eyes went wide. "Admiral, he's right. I'm detecting faint energy signatures everywhere. They're woven into the fabric of space itself." Zektar stared at the main view screen. The first solar system in this quarantined zone had 7 planets. 3 of them looked like they had once been teeming with life, but now they were just cold, dead rocks. But circling each of those dead planets were the colossal structures his sensors had picked up. "Take us to the nearest one," he commanded. "Full sensor sweep. I want to know what we're poking." As they got closer, the sheer size of the thing was breathtaking. It was a space station unlike anything the Empire had ever seen, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Its surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shimmer and play tricks on the eye. The design was clearly deliberate, but it didn't follow any known laws of engineering. "Sir," Torres called out, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "The station's active. I'm reading power, but it's low, like it's been sleeping." "Any life signs?" Zar asked. "Negative. But Admiral," Torres added, "it has docking bays big enough to swallow ships twice the size of our flagship." Dr. Yolan looked up from her console, stunned. "Admiral, the materials used to build this thing, they contain elements that aren't on our periodic table. Whoever built this had technology far beyond our understanding." That was all Zar needed to hear. "Prepare a boarding party. Full combat gear. We're going in." "Sir," Dr. Yolan protested. "First contact protocols are very clear," the Admiral cut her off. "Doctor, our records say whoever built this died out centuries ago. This is a salvage mission, not a first contact." But even as he said it, a sliver of doubt crept in. The station was just too perfect, too clean. It didn't look like a ruin. It looked like it was just waiting. It was a team of 12 battle-hardened Imperial Marines, plus Dr. Yolan and a couple of tech experts. They flew toward the station in a heavily armored shuttle, ready for anything. Or so they thought. The shuttle pilot's voice came over the comms, shaky. "Sir, one of the docking bays is opening. It's guiding us in." "Guiding you with what?" Zar demanded. "I don't know, sir, but the bay is filling with air and putting up a containment field. It's like it's rolling out the welcome mat." The shuttle landed without a single bump. Through the windows, the team saw a hangar so vast it could have held 50 of their ships with room to spare. And more importantly, the lights were on. Soft blue lights glowed from the walls, making the place feel strangely calm. "Atmosphere is breathable," reported Corporal Voss, the squad leader. "Gravity and temperature are standard Imperial levels. It's like they knew we were coming and tidied up the place." The team stepped out of the shuttle, weapons raised, hearts pounding. The docking bay was empty, but massive doorways led deeper into the station. The walls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to twist and crawl when you looked right at them. "Dr. Yolan," Zar's voice crackled in her ear. "What are you seeing?" "I'm analyzing them now, Admiral," she whispered back. Wait a minute. These aren't just decorations. It's some kind of display. I think it's trying to talk to us." As she said it, the symbols flared with light. They began to shift and reform into simpler, more familiar shapes. After a few moments, they twisted into something that looked almost exactly like Imperial writing. "Incredible," Dr. Yolan breathed. "The system is learning our language just by listening to our comms." A second later, the symbol snapped into perfect, clear text that read, "Welcome to Sanctuary Station Alpha 7. Please proceed to the central chamber for orientation." The Marines instinctively aimed their rifles at the wall, but Zar's voice came over the comm. "Hold your fire. Something is obviously inviting us in. Stay sharp, but let's see where this goes." They walked deeper into the station, following glowing pathways that lit up ahead of them. The hallways were wide and elegantly designed, feeling more like a museum than a space station. They never saw another living soul, but the station was clearly aware of them. Doors slid open before they reached them, and the lights brightened to show them the way. It felt like they were being led by a very polite, invisible host. They finally entered a gigantic, spherical room. In the very center, a platform began to hum with energy. A soft light gathered above it, slowly taking the shape of a person. It formed into a hologram of a human woman with short gray hair, wearing a simple, unfamiliar uniform. When the image solidified, she looked right at the team's lead camera, directly into Admiral Czar's eyes on the bridge of his ship, and she smiled. "Admiral," she said, her voice calm and clear in perfect Imperial standard. "I am Warden Sarah Chen, Guardian of the Terran Preserve. You have violated the Sanctuary Accord by entering this space. Please state the reason for your intrusion." Czar stepped forward, a smug look on his face. "I am Admiral Zakhtar of the Galactic Empire. We don't recognize any accord. We are here to claim this territory for the Empire." The hologram's smile faded into sadness. "I see. How long has it been, I wonder?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," Ztar scoffed. "Our historical records show nothing about this region." "Of course they don't," Sarah Chen said softly. "That was the point. We agreed to remove ourselves, to let the galaxy forget humanity ever existed." "But that's impossible," Dr. Yolan interjected. "Humanity went extinct centuries ago. The records are very clear." The warden's gaze softened. "Your records show what we wanted them to show. Humanity didn't go extinct, Doctor. We chose exile. We had to leave the galactic stage because we finally understood what we were becoming." "And what was that?" Star asked, intrigued despite himself. The hologram paused for a long moment. "We were too good at war, Admiral. Too clever. Too ruthless. Every alien species we ever met either surrendered to us or was wiped out by us. We were turning into the very monster we always claimed to fight, a galactic empire built on conquest." "Sounds exactly like our galactic empire," Zakhtar said with a proud grin. "Yes," Sarah Chen agreed, her voice laced with sorrow. "And we saw the end of that path. We had a choice. Become the brutal rulers of the galaxy, or disappear and let everyone else grow in peace. We chose peace." Dr. Yolan, ever the scientist, couldn't help but ask, "But this technology, these stations, how many of you are there?" "Enough," the warden answered simply. "We spent our first 100 years of exile building this sanctuary. We spent the second 100 years advancing our science beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen." "And the third century?" Zatar demanded, a hint of unease in his voice. The warden looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something like pity in her eyes. "The third century was spent preparing for today." "What day?" he snapped. "The day an arrogant fool like you would ignore our warnings and force our hand. We built this sanctuary to protect the galaxy from us. We wanted to be left alone." "And now what?" Czar asked, his hand dropping to his blaster. The warden's hologram flickered for a moment. "Now," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber and on his bridge, "we show you why we left." And with that, every screen on Admiral Czar's entire fleet went black, and every engine went silent, leaving them adrift and powerless in the dark. He thought he'd stumbled upon a forgotten ghost town, a relic of a species that had wiped itself out. Admiral Zakhtar, conqueror of a dozen systems, felt a surge of pride. This quarantined Terran space was supposed to be a tomb, but his fleet had found a single, lonely station, still humming with power. This would be his greatest discovery. But when he was greeted not by primitive survivors, but by the calm, unwavering hologram of a woman named Sarah Chen, his pride turned to ice. "Admiral," she said, her voice echoing across every speaker in the system, "I'm going to be very clear. Everyone is watching. Every last human settlement is tuned in to see what you do next. Some of my people think we should let you go. Others believe a threat like your empire must be erased. What would you do if a bully kicked down your door after 300 years of peace? Let me know in the comments, and stick around to see how this incredible story unfolds." Are you threatening my fleet? Zaktar growled, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. No, Sarah replied, her calm completely unshakable. I'm explaining your new reality. You've wandered into something far bigger than you can possibly imagine. You see, the human civilization you read about in your history books, the one that burned itself out in a fiery civil war, we didn't die. We just changed. For 3 long centuries, we became something new. And what is that exactly? His science officer whispered, completely captivated. The warden offered a small smile, but it held no warmth. We became the guardians of our own exile, she said, the silent watchers who swore that humanity would never again poison the galaxy. And sometimes, we're the response to people who just won't leave us alone. Zaktar looked out the viewport, and his blood ran cold. Hundreds, no thousands of lights were blinking on across the system. Massive structures, hidden for ages, were waking up. You have a choice, Admiral, the warden's voice continued, pulling his attention back. Take your ships, go home, and tell your Emperor that this sector is protected by automated defenses too dangerous to breach. Bury the report. Forget you ever saw us. The whole incident will fade into history. And if I refuse? Zaktar asked, his voice tight. The hologram flickered for just a second. Then we'll do what we've always done when our peace is threatened, she said softly. We will remove the threat. The Admiral returned to his flagship, his mind a whirlwind of confusion. The warden's words haunted him. As he stood in his private quarters, staring at the colossal human station that made his entire fleet look like a collection of toys, he tried to make sense of it all. Humans weren't extinct. They had chosen to hide, to lock themselves away from the galaxy for 300 years. But why? And what had they turned into during all that time alone? A chime broke his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Vex. Admiral, you have an urgent message from Imperial Command. Zaktar straightened his uniform, his face a mask of duty, and marched to the bridge. The stern face of Grand Admiral Thexura filled the main view screen. She was a Vorthon, a species known for their ruthless tactics and blind loyalty to the Emperor. Admiral Zaktar, she began, skipping any pleasantries. Your report has created quite a buzz. A hidden civilization? Secret technology? The Emperor is very, very interested. Yes, ma'am, Zaktar replied, choosing his words with extreme care. Your new orders are to secure that technology for the Empire. A full battle fleet is on its way to you. 10,000 ships, with Emperor Thaxion himself in command. 10,000 ships. The words hit Zaktar like a physical blow. This wasn't an investigation anymore. It was an invasion. Any chance for a peaceful withdrawal had just vanished. Ma'am, he tried. With all due respect, the people here, they want to be left alone. They mentioned an old agreement. The Empire doesn't recognize ancient agreements it didn't approve, Thexura snapped, cutting him off. You will hold your position until the fleet arrives. That is a direct order from your Emperor. The screen went blank. Zaktar stood in silence, the weight of the order crushing him. He looked at his crew, their faces beaming with pride and ambition, ready to conquer another system for the glory of the Empire. They trusted him, but for the first time in his long career, he wasn't sure he was leading them toward victory. These humans were different. They had the chance to destroy his boarding party, but they talked instead. They didn't act like any enemy he'd ever faced. Sir, a voice called from the sensor station. I'm picking up. Movement. All over the system. Hundreds of large objects are on the move. The view screen switched to a tactical map, and the entire bridge crew gasped. The dormant structures were moving, shifting, into a perfect, interlocking defensive formation. It was a three-dimensional web of unimaginable complexity. Dr. Hyland, analysis, Zactor barked. The scientist stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Admiral, it's incredible. They're creating a defensive grid. Every structure has overlapping fields of fire, perfect sensor coverage. It's perfect. How long would it take us to build a formation like that? Zactor asked. Months, maybe years, the doctor replied. They're doing it in under an hour. It's like they're all being guided by a single mind. Just then, a new transmission came in. It was the warden. Admiral, she said, her expression grim. Our long-range sensors see the massive fleet your Empire is assembling. It seems you've made your choice. The Empire doesn't make war on those who respect its authority, Zactor said, but the words felt like a lie in his own mouth. I see, the warden replied, her voice filled with a profound sadness. Admiral, I want you to understand something. Humanity didn't just spend 3 centuries hiding. We spent it preparing. We prayed this day would never come, but we prepared for it. Preparing how? Zactor demanded. Instead of answering, the screen behind her split into a dozen images. Zactor saw colossal shipyards tucked inside hollowed-out asteroids. He saw manufacturing plants powered by the cores of dead planets. He saw weapons platforms disguised as harmless space junk. We didn't waste our exile, she explained. We got very, very good at surviving. Dr. Yolan, his xenobiologist, gasped. Admiral, that shipyard, it could build ships bigger than our capital city. But we built more than just ships, the warden continued, her voice rising with quiet power. We built a new kind of society, one dedicated to ensuring humanity never again became a plague upon the stars. By hiding like cowards? Zactor shot back. The warden's face hardened. By becoming something the galaxy has never seen. A species that chose to control its own power rather than abuse it. But don't you dare mistake our restraint for weakness. The view changed, zooming to the edge of the system. A single tiny human ship appeared out of nowhere, moving with impossible speed and grace. It was a silver sliver against the black, and it headed directly for one of Zactor's heavily armed cruisers on the patrol line. Imperial vessel, a calm voice transmitted. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Corps. You are ordered to leave this system now. This is your only warning. The Imperial captain laughed and targeted the tiny ship. Unknown vessel, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender or be destroyed. And then something impossible happened. The human ship didn't even try to dodge. It simply absorbed the cruiser's massive energy beams. Its hull shimmered for a second, then fired the exact same energy right back. The Imperial cruiser's shields shattered instantly, its weapons sparking and dying. How? His tactical officer whispered in awe. The tiny ship sent one last message. Withdraw now or face the consequences. The Imperial captain, too proud to back down, fired his remaining weapons. This time, the human ship released a gentle pulse of light, and the massive warship just turned off. Its engines went cold. Its lights went dark. It was nothing more than a dead piece of metal, adrift in the void. The life support systems coughed and sputtered out. 1 minute they were an Imperial patrol. The next, they were just floating. Helpless, but alive. A calm voice broke the silence on their comms. Admiral, the warden said gently, our ship could have turned your craft into stardust in less than a second. But we didn't. We just disabled it. That ought to tell you something about what we want. Sector's eyes were glued to the tactical display. A human rescue ship was already moving toward his crippled cruiser. They weren't taking prisoners or finishing the job. They were coming to help. You're not behaving like an enemy, he said, the words catching in his throat. That's because we're not your enemies, Admiral. We're trying to stop a disaster. When your emperor gets here with his armada, he's going to be expecting a fight with some run-of-the-mill alien race. But we are not typical. We've had 3 centuries since we left the galactic stage. 300 years to perfect things other species can only dream of. What kind of things? Sector asked. Everything, the warden answered plainly. We have weapons that can make your own ships attack each other. Our defensive systems make us practically indestructible. We can replace any losses faster than you can cause them. But the most important thing we perfected is the art of war itself. Dr. Yolen, the human scientist, leaned into the camera's view. What does that even mean? Sector pressed. We studied every war in human history, she explained. Every single battle ever fought by any species in this galaxy. We learned from every win and every loss. We became absolute masters of warfare, in every form imaginable. Not because we're conquerors, but because we knew one day we'd have to be ready to defend our home. The view screen shifted, showing more images. Human soldiers were training in brutal simulations of dozens of alien worlds. Scientists were rolling out new technologies at a mind-boggling speed, and colossal computer systems were analyzing tactical data from thousands of different civilizations. You built your entire culture around war? Zar asked, a mix of horror and awe in his voice. We built our culture around survival, the warden corrected him, and that difference is crucial. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to rule a single soul. We just want to be left in peace. But if you force our hand, you'll find we are very, very good at fighting. All around them, more human ships began to appear. Not dozens, not even hundreds. Thousands. They shimmered into existence from the shadows of asteroid fields, decloaked from hidden stations, and simply phased into reality from the empty blackness of space. Where did they all come from? Torres whispered in shock. They were here the whole time, the warden explained. Cloaked, hidden, and waiting. We've had 3 centuries to master stealth. Most of our fleet has been watching you since the moment you crossed into our territory. In that instant, Zaktar understood the terrifying scale of what he was up against. This wasn't some lost colony or a forgotten outpost. This was an entire civilization that had spent 300 years getting ready for this exact day. Admiral, Lieutenant Vex's voice was tight with urgency. Long-range sensors are picking up the Imperial reinforcement fleet. ETA is approximately 18 hours. The warden on the screen just nodded sadly. We know. Our deep space sensors saw them launch 6 hours ago. 10,000 ships, with the Emperor's personal flagship leading the charge. They're coming to wipe us out. The Empire has never been defeated, Sector said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The Empire has never fought humanity at its full strength, the warden replied. Admiral, I'm going to make you one last offer. Take your fleet and go home. Go back to your empire and tell them this system is protected by automated defenses that are too dangerous to mess with. Your emperor will file the report away and forget we exist. Nobody has to die, and the galaxy can keep on spinning in peace. Zar glanced around his bridge. His crew was frozen, their eyes locked on him, waiting for his command. He thought about the disabled cruiser, the thousands of invisible human ships, and 3 centuries of relentless preparation for war. But then he thought about his oath to the Empire, his duty to his crew, and the direct orders from the Emperor himself. I can't, he finally said. My orders are to hold this position until reinforcements arrive. The warden looked at him with an expression that looked a lot like pity. Then I'm truly sorry, Admiral. You've seen what we can do to one ship. When your Emperor arrives, he's about to find out what we can do to an entire fleet. The transmission cut out, leaving Zaktar completely alone with the consequences of his choice. Around him, the bridge crew began quietly preparing for the battle they knew was inevitable. But a small voice in the back of Zaktar's mind whispered that they weren't just getting ready for a battle. They were getting ready for a slaughter. The Imperial reinforcement fleet ripped through hyperspace like a storm of fire and steel. 10,000 warships materialized at the edge of the Terran system, their hulls gleaming under the light of a distant star. At the very front was the Emperor's flagship, the Eternal Dominion. A monstrous dreadnought, capable of cracking planets in half. Admiral Czar watched them arrive from his bridge, a wave of both relief and dread washing over him. Relief that he was no longer facing these mysterious humans alone, and dread that even this overwhelming force might not be enough. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex reported, "we're getting a transmission from the Emperor's ship." On screen, the view screen flickered to life, showing the imposing figure of Emperor Thaxion himself. He was a draconian, tall and powerful, with scales that shimmered like dark, polished metal. His yellow eyes burned with the unshakable confidence of a ruler who had never, ever known defeat. "Admiral Czar," the Emperor's voice boomed across the bridge. "Report." "Your Majesty, we've run into a previously unknown human civilization here. They're claiming this system as their own territory based on some ancient treaty, and they've demonstrated technology that's far beyond anything we've seen before." "Humans?" The Emperor's face showed a flicker of surprise. "Our archives say that species died out centuries ago." "It seems that information was wrong, Your Majesty. They say they chose exile over extinction. They've apparently spent the last 300 years building up their technology and defenses in secret." Emperor Thaxion glanced at the tactical displays showing the human ship formations. "How many ships are we up against?" "We don't know for sure, sir. Their stealth tech is incredibly advanced. We're estimating several thousand vessels, but it could easily be more." "Several thousand against 10,000 of our finest Imperial ships." The Emperor let out a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Admiral, you've let shadows spook you. We will sweep these humans aside like they're nothing more than dust." But even as the Emperor dismissed the threat, his own tactical officers were poring over the sensor data. And what they were seeing was making them nervous. The human ships moved in perfect sync, their formations shifting and adapting like a single living creature. More than that, their technology readings were like nothing they had ever recorded. "Your Majesty," one of the officers said hesitantly, "the enemy ships are giving off energy signatures we can't identify, and they're defensive systems. They're unusual." "Unusual in what way?" "They seem to be able to absorb our energy weapons and redirect them, sir. When Admiral Czar's patrol ship fired on one of their vessels, the energy blast was reflected right back at them, only stronger." The Emperor's confidence faltered for just a heartbeat, but his pride quickly stamped it out. "New tricks can always be beaten by superior numbers. Prepare the fleet to attack." But before he could issue the final command, a new contact appeared on their sensors. A single tiny ship was heading straight for the Imperial fleet, broadcasting a request to talk. "Your Majesty," the comms officer reported, "the incoming ship is requesting permission to board. They say they have a representative who wants to speak with you in person." Emperor Thaxion thought it over. During his long reign, plenty of enemies had tried to negotiate once they were staring down the barrel of the Imperial fleet. It was usually a last-ditch effort, because they knew they were about to be crushed. "Permission granted," he declared. "But stay on full alert." The human shuttle was like a work of art. It moved with a liquid grace, as if the laws of physics were just friendly suggestions. It docked with the Eternal Dominion flawlessly, using a technology that was completely alien to the Imperial systems. The person who stepped out of the shuttle was an older human man with gray hair and eyes that were startlingly calm. He was dressed in simple clothes, a stark contrast to the fancy uniforms worn by most galactic diplomats. 2 Imperial guards marched him to the Emperor's throne room, where Thaxion sat waiting, flanked by his most trusted advisors. "Your Imperial Majesty," the human said, offering a respectful bow. "My name is Ambassador Marcus Webb, from the Terran Preserve Council. I've come to talk to you about preventing a great tragedy." "The only tragedy happening here," the Emperor sneered, "will be what happens to your people when they refuse to bow to imperial authority." Marcus Webb slowly looked around the massive throne room, taking in all the symbols of imperial might. There were banners from 100 conquered worlds hanging on the walls, and the floor was paved with rare metals stripped from subjugated planets. "Your Majesty," he finally said, "if I may ask, how long has the Galactic Empire been in power?" "For over 3,000 years, Thaxian answered with pride. "We have brought order and civilization to countless worlds." "And in all of that time," Webb continued, "have you ever met a species that chose to completely remove itself from the galaxy rather than submit to your rule?" The Emperor frowned. "No species has ever been given that choice." "Exactly," Webb said softly. "Every species you've come across has either bent the knee or been wiped out. But humanity, we chose a third path. We saw what we were becoming, and we chose to go into exile rather than fight you for control of the galaxy." "And now you think you can challenge us from your little hideout?" The Emperor scoffed. "Your Majesty, we have no desire for a fight," the ambassador said, his voice calm in the tense throne room. "We simply wish to continue our exile in peace. But if your hand is forced, you need to understand exactly what you'll be facing." Emperor Thaxian leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Oh? Do enlighten me." Webb, the human ambassador, gestured, and a holographic map shimmered to life between them. It was filled with star charts, technical readouts, and combat simulations that made the Emperor's top advisors suck in a sharp breath. "For 3 centuries, humanity has made a study of war," Webb explained. "Not because we enjoy it, but because we always feared this day would come. We've dissected every major conflict in galactic history, including your own. We've learned from your greatest triumphs and your most crushing defeats." "Impossible!" one of the Imperial generals blurted out. "Our military archives are the most secure in the galaxy." "Nothing is truly secure when someone has 300 years to find a way in," Webb countered smoothly. "We've slipped through your networks, we've memorized your tactics, we've mapped your technology. We know how your ships are made, how your commanders think, and the very pulse of how your empire breathes." The hologram shifted, now displaying breathtakingly detailed blueprints of the Empire's mightiest warships, with their structural weaknesses and tactical blind spots highlighted in red. The Emperor's staff stared in stunned silence, recognizing their own top-secret designs. "This is espionage on an unprecedented scale," the Emperor growled, his voice low and dangerous. "This is survival," Webb corrected him gently. "We had to understand our potential adversaries to have any hope of defending ourselves. But Your Majesty, that knowledge was a double-edged sword. Just as we learned all about you, we were forced to learn about ourselves." "And what does that mean?" Thaxian demanded. A profound sadness entered Webb's eyes. "We learned that humanity is very, very good at war. Frighteningly good. Our long exile gave us time to perfect the very skills we once used to nearly destroy one another. We've become something this galaxy has never seen before." "And what is that?" the Emperor asked, a flicker of unease finally touching him. "A species that has spent 3 centuries preparing for one single, solitary battle," Webb said, his voice dropping. "Every human in our corner of space has been trained from birth for this moment. Every ship we've built incorporates the lessons learned from every war you've ever fought. Every weapon we've forged is designed specifically to counter the tactics of your Imperial forces." The hologram flickered through images of vast human training grounds, automated factories and weapon ranges, all operating on a scale that was simply staggering. It was an entire civilization honed into a single, defensive weapon. "But it's more than that," Webb went on. "We learned to work together in a way no other species can. Humans in exile don't have rivals. We have perfect cooperation. Every one of us is linked through a quantum communication net. We think as a single mind. We act as a single body. We fight as a single soul. Emperor Thaxion rose from his throne, his massive frame casting a long shadow over the lone human ambassador. "Is that a threat?" he boomed. "I'm trying to save you, Your Majesty," Webb replied, his calm unshaken. "And your empire, and my people. If we fight, the galaxy will witness a conflict so devastating it will rewrite the history books. We don't want that." "Then surrender!" "We can't," Webb said, shaking his head with genuine regret. "This exile is the only thing that keeps humanity from becoming the monster we fear we could be. A relentless conqueror spreading through the stars and consuming everything. If we surrender, if we rejoin the galaxy, that self-control will be lost." "You speak as if you have a choice." "Everyone has a choice, Your Majesty. You can order your fleet to turn back and honor our isolation. Or you can attack and face a response that has been 300 years in the making. But make no mistake, if you attack, you won't be fighting a few thousand ships. You'll be fighting the absolute focused will of an entire species that has done nothing but prepare for this day." The Emperor glanced at his advisors and, for the first time in memory, saw wavering doubt in their eyes. They'd seen the sensor readings and the impossible human formations. They recognized technology that was light years ahead of their own. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate bluff?" Thaxion demanded. Webb simply touched a small device on his wrist. Instantly, every screen in the throne room, every monitor, every data slate flickered to life with live feeds from inside the Imperial fleet. The humans had hacked every single ship's communication system at the exact same time. "Your Majesty," Webb said, as the screens showed the interiors of dozens of Imperial bridge crews, completely unaware they were being watched. "This is not a bluff. As we speak, we are inside your ship's computers. We are listening to your communications. We are tracking your fleet's every move. We are analyzing your weapon systems. If we chose to, we could shut down your entire armada without firing a single shot." The Emperor's royal guards instinctively raised their weapons, but Webb held up his hands. "We're not here to cause harm," he said. "We're here to show you our capabilities, so you understand that a fight would be a tragedy for us all." Emperor Thaxion stared, mesmerized and horrified, at the screens showing his own mighty fleet so utterly compromised. His imperial pride was at war with the dawning, terrifying realization that this was an enemy unlike any he had ever imagined. "What is your proposal?" he finally asked, the words tasting like ash. "Withdraw your fleet," Webb said plainly. "Bury this incident under so much classification it never sees the light of day. Forget you ever found us. In exchange, we will continue our quiet exile and never meddle in galactic politics again." "And if I refuse?" Webb's face was a mask of infinite sorrow. "Then we will do what we have spent 300 years preparing for. We will defend ourselves. And I promise you, Your Majesty, after 3 centuries of practice, we have gotten very, very good at defense." The throne room was deathly quiet, the only sound the gentle thrum of the starship's engines. Outside, 10,000 Imperial warships hung in the void, awaiting the command to strike, while thousands of human ships stood ready. Emperor Thaxion stared at the screens displaying his helpless fleet, then at the ambassador who spoke of peace and self-imposed exile, and finally at his advisors, who could no longer meet his gaze with their usual unwavering confidence. For the first time in his long, conquering reign, he faced an enemy who desperately did not want to fight, and that scared him more than any army ever had. The Emperor locked eyes with Ambassador Webb, his own burning with the fury of a ruler who had never ever been defied. The silence in the throne room stretched on, thick with unspoken tension. "No!" he finally roared, the word bouncing off the high metal ceilings. "The Galactic Empire does not run. We do not bargain with ghosts, and we certainly do not bend to the will of a species that should have stayed extinct." Webb's shoulders slumped, just a fraction, as if he knew this was coming but had dared to hope for better. "Your Majesty, I beg you to reconsider. What comes next can never be taken back." "What comes next?" the Emperor bellowed, standing to his full, intimidating height. "Is your people learning the price of insolence? Guards, escort this diplomat back to his vessel. Then prepare the fleet to attack on my command." As Webb was led away, he tapped his wrist device one last time. Across the entire Imperial Armada, a single message flashed on every screen for just a second. Sanctuary Protocol. Terminated. Threat level. Extinction event. Authorization. Full release. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Zakakar felt a cold dread snake down his spine as he read the words. His crew was buzzing with the usual pre-battle confidence of soldiers who had only ever known victory. But the Admiral remembered the Warden's frantic warnings, the patrol ship that was disabled in an instant, and the Ambassador's deep, haunting sadness. "Sir," his lieutenant reported, "the Emperor's orders are in. All ships to battle formation. We are to begin bombardment immediately." "Acknowledged," Zakar managed to say, his voice hollow. All across the system, the human response was instantaneous and terrifyingly precise. Ships that had been scattered in loose formations snapped into perfect alignment, moving as if they were a single living thing. Defensive stations that had appeared inert suddenly flared to life, flooding Imperial sensors with energy readings that were off the charts. "All ships!" the Emperor's voice thundered across the comms. "Attack! Show these relics the might of the Empire!" The first wave of Imperial ships, more than 1,000 heavy cruisers, unleashed hell. A storm of energy beams and missile volleys lit up the darkness between the two fleets. It was a show of force that had shattered entire worlds. But the human ships didn't react like any enemy they'd ever faced. They didn't scatter, dodge, or break formation. Instead, their hulls seemed to shimmer, absorbing the full onslaught of the attack. They glowed intensely for a moment, then redirected the raw energy right back at the Imperial fleet, with pinpoint accuracy. "What in the stars?" his sensor officer gasped, watching in disbelief as Imperial cruisers were crippled by their own reflected firepower. The returned volleys were like surgical strikes. They weren't aimed to destroy, but to disable. Weapons, engines, life support, all were snuffed out in an instant. Within minutes, hundreds of Imperial ships were dead in the water, their crews trapped inside helpless, drifting metal coffins. "Second wave, advance!" the Emperor ordered, his voice strained with disbelief. But the second wave fared even worse. The human ships moved with an impossible grace, seeming to flicker in and out of reality. They would appear behind an Imperial squadron, strike with strange weapons that bypassed shields entirely, and then simply vanish before anyone could fire back. And then, the true nightmare began. A few of the disabled Imperial ships suddenly powered back on, their lights flaring to life, but they weren't under Imperial command anymore. "Sir!" the tactical officer shouted in pure panic. "Those disabled ships, they're targeting us! Their systems have been hijacked!" Admiral Zakar could only watch in utter horror as his own vessels began to turn their guns on their sister ships. But the real horror was what he heard crackling over the comms. The crews of the compromised ships weren't being eliminated. They were being forced to watch as their own vessels opened fire on their friends, their brothers in arms. "That's impossible," one of his tactical officers breathed. "How are they hijacking our fleet?" The answer blazed across every screen in the Imperial Armada. Ambassador Webb's face appeared, but the sorrow was gone, replaced by steel. "Imperial forces," he announced, his voice calm but unyielding. "You are seeing what humanity became in our long isolation. We didn't just build better weapons or faster ships. We learned how to make your own technology your greatest enemy." As he spoke, even more Imperial ships suddenly went rogue, their systems turning against their masters. But the takeovers were surgical. Weapons aimed at human ships were disabled, while life support and communications were left untouched. "Every ship in your fleet," Webb continued, "is built on principles we gave up on centuries ago. Your computers run on logic systems we invented. Your weapons are based on physics we mastered. Your communication networks use protocols we designed. We didn't just study your technology. We poured the foundation it was built on." Emperor Thaxion's enraged voice cut through the chaos. "All ships, fall back to Formation 7. Prepare a coordinated strike." But when the Imperial ships tried to regroup, they found chaos. Their orders were being intercepted, twisted. Their navigation systems were feeding them lies, sending them spinning into each other. Any ship that managed to lock onto a human target found its weapons systems fizzling out with mysterious malfunctions. "This is cyber warfare on a level I've never dreamed of," Dr. Yulan murmured from her console. "They aren't just blocking our systems. They're rewriting them on the fly." The human fleet, in stark contrast, moved like a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. Each ship knew exactly where every other would be, a flawless, silent ballet. Their attacks were like a surgeon's scalpel, designed to disable, not destroy, demonstrating a tactical genius the Empire had never imagined. But the scariest part wasn't their tech. It was their mercy. With every passing moment, it became sickeningly obvious that the humans could have wiped out the entire Imperial fleet in the opening minutes of the fight. Instead, they were choosing to disarm ships, to capture rather than kill, to teach a lesson rather than to annihilate. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex reported, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and confusion. "We're getting damage reports from all over the fleet. But, sir, there are no casualties. The humans aren't killing anyone." Admiral Czar just stared at the tactical map. More than half of his fleet was now dead in the water, or worse, controlled by the enemy. Yet every single one of his crew members was still alive. The humans were fighting a war where the goal was to win without taking a single life. "What kind of enemy does that?" he whispered to himself. The answer came from a voice he never expected to hear again. The warden appeared on his private screen, her face serious, but not hostile. "The kind that never wanted to be your enemy in the first place," she said simply. "Admiral, your Emperor rejected our last offer for peace. Now we have to show him why that was a terrible mistake. But we won't become monsters just to prove a point." Around them, the one-sided battle raged on. The Imperial fleet was being taken apart, piece by piece, by an enemy that seemed to predict their every move before it was made. Ships were snared by invisible tractor beams, hit by weapons they couldn't detect, and piloted by systems they no longer controlled. "How?" Czar asked, his voice raw. "How is any of this possible?" 300 years of practice, the warden replied. 300 years with every human mind dedicated to a single purpose, surviving our exile. We analyzed every part of warfare, every possible strategy, every imaginable opponent. We transformed into something the galaxy has never witnessed, a species that has turned war into a perfect science." On the main display, Emperor Thaxion's flagship was now completely surrounded by human vessels, but they didn't fire. They just hung there in the silence of space. The message couldn't have been clearer. The Emperor's life was theirs for the taking, and they were choosing to let him live. "Your Emperor has a choice," the warden said. "He can continue this pointless fight and watch his entire fleet be captured without landing a single blow, or he can finally admit that some things are more important than imperial pride." As if on cue, Ambassador Webb appeared again on the fleet-wide broadcast. Only this time, he was standing on the bridge of the Emperor's own flagship. "Your Majesty," Webb said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Your ship's defenses are down. Your crew is perfectly safe, and your personal guards are probably wondering why their blasters suddenly don't work. I'm standing here on your bridge to prove a point. We could have ended your life at any moment. We chose not to." The Emperor, now surrounded by human soldiers who seemed to have materialized from thin air on his most heavily guarded ship, suddenly looked very old and very small. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The same thing we've always wanted," Webb answered. "To be left alone. Your Majesty, in the last hour, you have witnessed what 3 centuries of human focus can achieve, and this was just us holding back. We don't want to hurt anyone." "You have humiliated the greatest military in the history of the galaxy," Thaxian spat back. "We have shown you why we had to leave," Webb corrected him gently. "Humanity didn't go into hiding because we were weak. We went into hiding because we were too powerful. What you saw today is what happens when you force our hand. Can you even imagine what we could become if we decided to expand across the galaxy again?" The Emperor glanced around his bridge at the silent human soldiers. They held weapons he couldn't identify, wore armor that seemed to shimmer and bend light, and moved with the unnerving precision of a single organism. "You are not like the other species," he said, the realization dawning on him. "No, Your Majesty, we are not. We are the species that chose to chain its own power rather than misuse it. But that choice only holds if everyone else respects our borders." All across the Imperial fleet, disabled ships were slowly coming back online. Their systems were restored, but their weapon arrays were permanently fried. Human medical ships were already moving between the crippled vessels, offering assistance to any injured Imperial sailors. "What happens now?" Emperor Thaxian asked, his defeat total. Webb offered a sad smile. "Now, you go home. You will classify this entire event as top secret. You will add your own warnings to our beacon network. You will tell the rest of the galaxy that this corner of space is guarded by automated defenses far too dangerous to challenge, and you will forget you ever found us. And if I refuse, then we will be forced to find a more permanent solution to the problem of Imperial ambition," Webb said softly. "Your Majesty, you've seen what we can do when we are merciful. Do not make us show you what we can do when we are not." The Emperor was silent for a long, heavy moment, a prisoner on his own ship, defeated by an enemy that had refused to kill a single one of his men. Finally, he gave a slow, tired nod. "Very well. But this is not over." "Yes, Your Majesty," Webb said, his voice full of pity. "It is. Because now you know what we truly are. And you know why the galaxy is a much safer place with us locked away." Hours later, the remnants of the Imperial fleet limped away from Terran space, their pride completely shattered, but their lives miraculously intact. Behind them, the human ships melted back into the blackness, vanishing as if they were never there. Admiral Zector, standing on his own bridge watching the ancient warning beacons flare back to life, finally understood what they meant. They weren't a threat. They were a shield. They were protecting the galaxy from a species that had grown too powerful to ever be set free. The beacons resumed their timeless broadcast, but now they were joined by new signals, broadcast on Imperial channels. Terran Quarantine Zone. Entry forbidden. Violators will be met with extreme prejudice. Some doors should never be opened. In the years that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The quiet knowledge that humanity was out there, watching from the shadows, cooled the tempers of warring species. Conflicts became rarer, and diplomacy became the rule, not the exception. The great powers learned to talk out their problems, always aware that somewhere in the darkness, patient guardians were waiting to step in if civilization ever threatened to tear itself apart. And deep in Terran space, humanity returned to its lonely vigil. Forever watchful, forever prepared, and forever hoping the rest of the galaxy would learn to be better than they once were. The quarantine held, and the galaxy was safer for it.